Today I'll be talking about online assessments. When we think about online classrooms, there are two types of assessments that we need to have. The first are our formative assessments. Formative assessments are small stakes assessments that help students and the instructor see how well the students understand the course content, basically how well or how close they are to meeting the course competency or the unit competency. So these tend to be very low stakes activities. They include quizzes, learning activities, and lab activities definitely fit kind of into that mold. So generally they don't make up a lot of your final course grade. They are If they're done well, they offer the students a chance to practice and determine how much they know. So um, if they can make things up, like it definitely helps the students and reduces testing anxiety or any anxiety actually for the class, and definitely promotes equity for grading if students have options to retake these sorts of assessments to show improved understanding and mastery over time. So ultimately, when you think about the formative assessments that you select for your class, you'll want to think about the role that they're going to play in the final course grade. If they are very heavily weighted, you might find the students, and depending on if you allow retakes or not, these can actually end up start kind of bringing the student's grade down, even though they might improve in their understanding overall. So one thing I've thought about recently is if you can allow students to retake assessments to show improvement and mastery, because we all know sometimes our first stab or maybe we're having a bad day, we just don't do too well. But if we're given opportunities to go back and revise, we can correct our mistakes in our understanding and we can improve and show that we actually do meet the competency or the expectation for that module. We also want to think a bit about how students receive feedback on these assessments. The faster the students get the feedback, the more quickly they can correct their misunderstandings and improve to meet those competencies. So quizzes are really nice if you can do auto-graded quizzes. They have instantaneous feedback, whereas lab assignments or some learning activities where you're giving individualized feedback, which is very important and very helpful, it can be delayed pretty significantly from when the time the student submits it and you finally are able to return that feedback. So an example of a formative assessment that I've used in a class are quizzes. I do like the auto-grade options because of that fast feedback and turnaround. In my courses, I allow students to do multiple submissions to really encourage practice. So in my class, these quizzes are not worth very much, but the students can retake them as many times as they need to. It's out of a large test bank because my goal was to actually encourage them to practice as much as possible. So when they retake it 7 times, they see more questions. They're challenging their brains much more than if they just take it one time, to really focus on that practice component. So these are, again, an example of a low stakes assessment. So it shouldn't affect their grade overall if they do poorly on this one assignment. Next, an example would be a lab assignment. So this is a nice review of the content material. For my classes, geology classes, the labs do have that hands-on application, but any type of application. Google Earth could be a nice hands-on application, even though it's all on the computer. The feedback for lab assignments can be individualized, which is nice because you can really see how every student is doing. But the problem is they might turn it in on one day and then you can't get the feedback to them for several days. So that delay in feedback can hinder the ability for the students to really utilize that feedback. So what you can do in this case is encourage the student to review that feedback. So you can have follow-up activities like a reflection, review your lab feedback and identify like something that a mistake you made and how the feedback helped you better understand it. something like that. Maybe they actually redo parts of the lab as well. So revision options can be really helpful. Again, the goal here is to allow the students to see what they understand, go back and relearn what they don't, and then continuously improve so they can succeed in the class. Summative assessments, these are your end assessments, end evaluations. So very much like your face-to-face classroom, you have exams and tests. In the online course, they can be proctored or unproctored. An unproctored exam would be just like an online exam that you have in your class, maybe password protected, time or whatnot. Basically, you have to assume that the students are going to be doing open book, open notes when you do these types of assignments. Just kind of accept the beast for what it is and then work to really create questions that require students to put authentic thought together to really explain things so that you can determine if they really understand it or not. Proctored exams are similar, except the student is taking the exam or test in the presence of a proctor. So there are online web-based proctoring tools that you can use. I'll talk about this on the next slide or not. Final papers, final projects, presentations, and portfolios are also examples of summative assessments. So some considerations for what you choose is knowing how big your class size is. If you have a decent size, I'd say a great size for an online class is small, like 20, maybe 30 students at most. 30 seems a lot to me. But the smaller your class size is, the more interaction you can have with every learner, so it tends to be better for those students. But it's not always the case. Your institution is going to tell you how big your class size is, and that will affect how much time you have to go through those assessments. So if you have 100+ students and you don't have TAs, or you're having to grade everything yourself for whatever reason, having maybe, 100 5-minute presentations or papers to read could be quite challenging. So you'll need to think about what the appropriate assessment is based on your class size, what you're actually assessing. So is it a certification course? Does it have some sort of like testing requirement from a state, province, governing body, whatever? So how does that affect what tools you can use to make your evaluations? So what supports do you have available? Do you have teaching assistants? Do you have grading assistants? Do you have a testing center or not? Are there proctoring services available? Spend time researching and finding out what's available to you at your institution, because that might help you decide what you want to do. And then always think about what potential exists for plagiarism and cheating. This comes up a lot when faculty are moving to online. A lot of people are uncomfortable with this idea, but I think it's important to just put that reminder out there that plagiarism and cheating happen in face-to-face classes. They can happen in online. They can happen anywhere. This is kind of a whole bucket of worms to get into. There are a lot of reasons why students will, decide to plagiarize or to cheat. And it's not just necessarily that they're looking for the easy way out. There is a lot of factors. So instead of focusing on why students might do that, it's better to think of ways to create a class that encourages the students to be excited and get the students engaged in your content, in your course, get them interested in it, and create assessments that truly evaluate their understanding, make it authentic, and you'll actually see all of these problems go away if you address all the other aspects of course design and really focus on that high quality. So it's not just the assessment you pick, but it's everything. It's the learning activities, your instructor presence. It's all in there. That is going to change how your students approach your course ultimately. So another example of a summative assessment it would be to use an exam. So I'm just listing proctored exams, and this is sort of a general example. There are formal companies such as ProctorU, Smarter Proctoring. There's lots of stuff out there that offer proctoring. You might like it, you might not like it. There is I'm not going to say much to this. I actually don't use proctored exams. I don't use exams if I can avoid them because I like other types of summative assessments because of authenticity. But if an exam is where you're going to go, decide if you can put it online. If it's going to be unproctored, just you got to make it open. So it's going to be open book, open note. I'd be honest with yourself, it'd be really hard for it not to. And then just try to create your questions so that the students are actually having to show that they are responding. You can even try to have the students do video responses. So give them a question and then, within your LMS, see if you have an option to have a video turn on and they're going to explain an answer. So you'll see them and then you can or hear their answer in their own words. But anyway, if proctored exams are where you're going, you can look at the formal companies and then you can weigh all the benefits and drawbacks to those companies. You can see if your institution supports proctoring. You might have a testing center available to you so students can schedule a time to go and take their test with a proctor. You can also do what I call faculty supported proctoring. This is where you're just going to reserve a place on campus and have students maybe you pick like 3 different times and they schedule and come on campus to take their exam with you. In either case of this institution supported or the faculty supported proctoring, what I've said so far assumes that the students can get onto campus. That's not always the case. So you'll have to have options available for students to locate their own proctors, and then you'll have to create forms and you'll approve their proctors or not. What this means, like they can go and find a public librarian, maybe somebody working at a college or an institution closer to where they are, and they find a faculty member who will be their proctor. So you use different sites of sign-up sheets and forms to get the proctors approved so that students who can't come onto campus can use those independent proctors. You then send your exam to the proctor. Proctor will then shred the exam or send it back to you, whatever. There's always to do that, but that's one example if you're looking for exams. Alternatively, you can do summative assessments. These include final projects and papers. They tend to be authentic. You're going to hear the students, you're going to read their writing. If they're doing presentations, you'll see their faces and their voices. And even better is when you give the students control over what they are doing in their final project, give them choice, they'll be more committed to the project. And again, you'll see the issues with cheating and plagiarism start to go down. So people tend to invest more when they care. If you are doing final projects and papers, make sure you design it to be completed throughout your course. Don't just assign it on day one and expect it's going to happen at the end, because if not, you'll get a bunch of garbage or some students just won't do it. So instead, when we talk about course mapping, build in checkpoints, build in small things where they turn in and they show you that they're making progress. Maybe each unit they do a little part of their project and they submit it to you. That will help you end up with really great final projects to check out at the end, and it will make it it will make it manageable for the students to get through, and the quality will just increase. Presentations are great. In my own courses, I do have students do short audio presentations. Video is optional just for privacy and comfort, but as long as I can hear the student and then they show me some sort of visual on the screen, PowerPoint, it's fine. Final thoughts. Probably came through already, but select assessments that work for your course, your teaching style, and your course plan. Try to focus on authentic assessments as much as possible to engage your learners and reduce your potential for cheating. And utilize your formative assessments as a learning tool, not as an evaluation if at all possible. So allow for mistakes in learning and progression. I hope you found this presentation useful. Feel free to add comments as you like.